Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited that you've joined us. Our topic today is Don't Be a DevOps Failure. Boy, that sounds ominous. Our webinar is sponsored by Broadcom today. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'll serve as your host and moderator. A few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar, and all participants will receive an email that has in it a link to the recording as well as the slides. We're also giving away three $50 Amazon gift cards at the end, so stick around to find out if you're a winner. We also encourage questions. Our speakers love questions, and I think as you listen to today's webinar, it's highly interactive. So please ask your questions whenever you want. We'll try to fit some of those in during the talk as well as towards the end. So let's move on to our topic, Don't Be a DevOps Failure. It's my great pleasure to introduce two fantastic speakers. First is Stephen Filani, who is head of products for the continuous testing business unit at Broadcom. And also with him is Alex Martins, head of solution engineering at CA Technologies. So let's get things started. I'm going to hand the baton over to you guys. Take it away.
Thank you. Hey there. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. As a brief introduction, my name is Stephen Filoni. I have been in, let's say, the testing DevOps space for about 20 years. I started off at a company called Mercury Interactive, and I've been at quite a few startups and different things, but I've been here at CA Broadcom for the last 4 years. Alex, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. Hey everyone, Alex Martins here. Also, I've been in the software development and testing space for about 20 years, working for multiple companies and doing different roles, such as being on the systems integrator side as a partner, being an actual, what we call today a customer, and also working for a software company now, across the different technology stacks over the past couple of decades. So excited to be here today and try to help you navigate through the DevOps transformation.
All right, so let's get started. The whole point of this is to talk about how we can really improve what we're doing with DevOps. And of course, my clicker does not work. There we go. So first off, if you look at this quote, this is basically Agile. Years ago, Agile took over, and this was the panacea. Everything's going to be Agile. It's fantastic. It took a while for developers to get into the Agile, but if you look, you didn't improve the speed of actual deployment. You couldn't get out faster because really it was only the developers that went to Agile. No one else really did. So the deployment, the ops people, the testing people, everyone else was still stuck. And so what ended up happening? Well, we need some way of bridging and helping this out. So we ended up having DevOps. Let's break down the barriers. So now DevOps is this panacea that will take what was the goals of Agile and make it a reality. Alex, anything you would like to say about DevOps?
Yeah, I was waiting for my cue. And that's a great point because 15 years ago or so, we were very heavily invested on Agile transformations, and as you mentioned, it did not deliver that business agility that it was aspiring to deliver, and most of the challenges faced was really on the transformation, not just inside IT, but transforming the business as a whole. Fast forward to today, most Agile transformations have somewhat delivered some results, but mostly around accelerating bringing that idea, that business idea, to code, right? So essentially developing the idea into an application code, for example. But taking that code to the hands of the users, that's something that Agile did not deliver. And that's where we see DevOps kind of bridging that gap to really take that code that now is developed much faster than before, but deliver that code to the hands of the users in a very fast way and with quality, to finally deliver on the promise of business agility. So that's kind of how we see these days most companies trying to navigate the transformation, not just from an Agile perspective anymore, but also from a transformation, because you really, from a DevOps perspective, because you really need the two as sort of a positive symbiotic relationship, Agile and DevOps, in order to truly achieve that business agility.
And we are seeing enterprises across the board attempting to adopt DevOps. I say attempting, right? A lot of people are not being that successful yet, but they're attempting to adopt. And they're adopting it because they want to see the speed. They want to get things out to production faster, and with the promise of improved quality, at least not decreased quality. But the idea around Agile is when you do something smaller, you have smaller changes, smaller impact, so it should have better quality. And so you should be able to deliver what the business is asking for faster, while you still get that, so you get the customers to be happier with you. There's a lot of reasons why this is happening, right? You have the customer's expectation. You have competitors that are doing things that are faster. You also have the need where trying to hire engineers, trying to hire programmers is also a challenge. And so if you don't transform yourself into modern ways of doing things, it's going to be hard to get engineers into those fields as well. So for many different reasons, this transformation is happening. And so we're trying to achieve these strong business outcomes. Yes, Alex.
No, I was just going to jump in, because one of the things that changed a lot in the past 3 years is that finally all the research around DevOps, for the first time, consistently, over the past 3 years, most research are actually, for the first time in our industry, being able to correlate the transformation of the company, right? Be it, call it whatever you want, Agile transformation, DevOps transformation, but the actual transformation of the company, the efforts that are put into that, these research are actually being able to correlate that transformation effort to a real business outcome. And that is really that additional push for organizations to get started, because up until 3 years ago, it was more of a kind of a leap of faith, right? Oh, you have to do it because everybody's doing it, because the market,
because all these startups are doing it. All these startups are doing it, so therefore you have to. It's sort of like open space in offices.
Yeah.
Does that prove any value? I bet you, if you look at any report, there is very little value in open space in offices, especially when I'm around, because I'm a very loud person. I disrupt everyone. But at least with DevOps, over the last 3 years, we're seeing that there is actual strong correlation between doing BizOps and actually getting the value out the door.
Yeah. And that's why we've seen the past 3 years somewhat of an acceleration across different companies towards that transformation, because now leadership, right, executive leadership, are inclined and are much more open, and the people that are in tune with the market and the industry, executive leadership is sponsoring those transformation top down, because as you probably everybody on the meeting here knows, most of these transformation starts kind of bottom up, and it's hard to scale consistently only from a bottoms up perspective. But when you have top down as well, then things really start picking up, and that's what we see in the past 3 years. Is everybody has been trying to go through some type of transformation.
But of course, we talk about the goodness, but you guys are all on this call. There's a lot of problems still. It's still, as the title of the slide says, elusive to get the success out of DevOps. When you look at only 1 in 10 organizations have mastered the balance between the innovation and the risk. And there's many different reasons for this, right? Obviously, there's always the culture. Let's just get that out there. There's always the culture thing. So if the companies have not transformed themselves in order to take advantage of Agile and DevOps and continuous delivery, that's going to be a problem. You're not going to get the speed you're looking for. And even if you do end up with the speed you're looking for, you're not going to have the quality that you're expecting to get out the door, because you haven't done that full balance of what it takes in order to do DevOps properly. Some people think DevOps is an individual person. They've created DevOps, right? Many people on the phone maybe have that DevOps title, but it's like they created a DevOps person where that person or that group is supposed to help with the handoffs between the developers and the operations, where you really have to work on how do you break those silos down? How do you adjust the entirety, not just how do you make development faster, but how do you adjust your requirements and your features and get the testing done in the same time with the Agile teams or the squads? And how do you get the operations guys involved so that when you are ready to deploy, the deploy just happens, that it is not an event. So trying to plug all that together is still a challenge. I actually have, I think I was going to say it in a slide or two, but I'll say it now. A financial company, I will not say who it is. I was talking to them a couple months ago, and they were telling me that they were so excited. They were only releasing once every 4 to 6 months, and now they're releasing less than every 4 weeks. Very excited about it. I'm like, wow, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that you're able to do that. How did you do it? Well, our management, just like Alex was saying, top down, our management decided that they went in and they were going to push the change. And they said, you know what we see as the bottleneck? We see this testing thing as this is a problem for us. So you know what? We're going to get rid of our testing group and we're going to give it to the developers, and the developers are responsible for everything because that's what Agile says to do anyway. So we're going to make the developers responsible for everything. And we are seeing so much success in our releases. I'm like, really? So I'm going to guess your releases, you're noticing a drop in quality. Now, I said other words other than drop in quality, but since this is being recorded, I am not going to use those same words. But, and then they all just look shocked at me. And they're like, yes, in fact, even though our metrics we were being measured on is how fast we can get something out the door, it is true. The quality of what we're releasing is worse. And that's the problem. That is, you're not doing the balance. You didn't do the right culture shift. You didn't do the right training. There's many things that are missing here if you don't do it right.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really find it interesting, and as I talk to different companies, is that like you hear, oh no, we've restructured our organization. Now we have squads, we have tribes, we have communities of practice. We are super agile and embrace DevOps, right? But then when you start really talking about what they're trying to overcome, what they're trying to solve, right? Then it's really the same basic problems as always. So when they were totally siloed, development as a group, testing as a group, ops as a group, and no access to the business. And so, yeah, they have all this nice structure, very modern, but the fundamentals are still not fixed. So, in working with those companies, we always like to start with the basics, right? So, what is the value stream that we're trying to really impact moving forward? And that's usually how you're going to be most successful if you are serious about transformation. Do a value stream mapping exercise involving everybody in that value stream, starting from the business all the way to production. And then as you map that out, identify what are the bottlenecks, what are the problems that really take priority in solving versus the others. And then once you have that defined, then create or define your KPIs that's basically going to be your guide to measuring if you're doing better or worse than before. Because if you transform your organization, you know, in squads, tribes, etc., but you're still measuring those teams by the same old KPIs, like Steve was saying. Well, you have to deliver code faster. Great, I can do that, but it's going to be crappy code. And that's what we see in a lot of these transformations, is that, hey, they automated the pipeline. That's awesome, but there's no quality. The number of incidents in production has increased. So why? Like, why did you go through all that trouble if your users are, you know, suffering from a user experience perspective? So that elusiveness, like Steve was saying, is something real. And if you guys are going down that transformation, you know, just be mindful of that. And there are many different ways to tackle problems, but usually, you know, invariably, it will start with some type of value stream mapping exercise.
And obviously, we don't really have to point these out, but it's good to show and highlight failures, right? Because when you are trying to go out faster, maybe your failures aren't going to be as dramatic as these failures. I mean, the Iowa caucus, anyone that's in America heard about the Iowa caucus. Who puts out an application that was never tested? The users of the app never used it until the moment they had to use it. There was a lot of problems there, but they were trying to go quickly. They were trying to go fast. They were trying to be agile, and it didn't work. And you also see how Facebook has outages, Amazon has outages, and we all know about Boeing. I'm not saying necessarily Boeing was because they were trying to be agile, but when you don't have the quality attached with your innovation, a lot of bad things can happen. So you don't want to ignore one for the other. You want to have the right KPIs, have the right metrics, but you don't want to sacrifice. You can do both. You can get the speed and you can get the quality as needed. But
Hey, Stephen, if I can jump in, just a question from our audience here, directly on your topic here. How is it that organizations sort of miss the intent and jump right to the answer of, well, if testing is the problem, get rid of the testers, when the real intent is to change how you're doing that? What are strategies for helping avoiding that problem?
All right, so I think that is a very good question. Why do they miss it? They miss it for a few reasons. One, sometimes they have a lot of people breathing down their throats, saying, we have to fix this. We have too much competition. Look what the competition's doing. We're behind. Why are we behind? Because you're too slow in getting this out the door. If you can't fix it, I'll fix it for you. Get rid of them. The developers are supposed to be good. Let's just push it out the door. That is one reason why it happens, is because you have so much pressure to deliver that you ignore the other things. Another reason why people end up sort of ignoring, whether it's why would you get rid of testers if you know you need testing, right? Why would you do something like that? Is they're so focused, as Alex was talking about, as we've been saying, the KPI. Instead of focusing on what the business actually needs, instead of focusing on the actual outcome of what you're trying to achieve. Look, we're all writing code and delivering code for a business outcome. But in our day-to-day world, we ignore the business outcomes because we're focused on our goal. My goal is to get this out the door faster. How can I get this out the door faster? Because I'm going to get my bonus based on getting it out the door faster. I'm going to get a promotion if I get this out the door faster. So that's my focus. And once you have that myopic focus, it's amazing how many things fall to the wayside, and then you do whatever you can to meet your goal. For instance, I'll say support engineers. Historically, support engineers were tracked on how many closed cases they have. The faster they can close the case, many closed cases, and they get bonuses and they get recognition based on closed cases. Well, guess what? You end up having a lot of closed cases. And amazingly, you have a lot of open cases that sound very similar to those closed cases because you can't reopen a case. If you reopen a case, that goes against your metric. So you do things towards your metrics that you're being tracked on. Alex, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that because I remember, back in the day, we like when I was running, a testing organization, we were measured, like you were saying, by a couple of different metrics, but the main ones were number of tests created by each individual and number of tests executed by each individual and number of defects found by each individual. So guess what? Like we were rock stars, right? Oh, you need you're low on your test case number. Oh, just create one. It's a one line, but it's a test case, right? And then the same thing for defects. Oh, this button's color doesn't really look that good. Oh, it's a defect, right? And then so it is really about defining the right KPIs for the team, not for the testers or for the developers or for operations or support or business. It's about defining what are the KPIs for the team to succeed, which usually are tied to a business objective. So yeah, just firing all testers is really not the way to go. It's
so
somebody else.
So what I've just learned,
up that work.
What I just learned from this is that Alex, he games his KPIs. This is what I've learned for this whole webinar. Alex games his KPIs. I'm going to have to make sure that he has much tighter KPIs so that he can't game them. That's what I've learned. Thank you all for showing up.
Listening.
Keep your eye open.
It's interesting if I can jump in. Hopefully, Alex's manager isn't listening today, but there's quite a few questions that have come in. They're almost commentary, and the thread in all of this is, what about doing fire and forget automated testing? Sort of the thread is, what's the intent and what's the outcome you're really going after, not doing it for doing its sake or because it's the next shiny object, right? It's really getting back to the basics of here's what we want to achieve. It isn't faster testing. It's we want to get releases out because we want to make money sooner or whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to comment on your webinar here, guys. But that's the kind of the thread. So I think you're striking a chord with our audience, I guess is what I'm saying.
But you are so correct. And that is one of the big points that we're trying to get at is people have lost focus. They're focused on just the one aspect versus if you look at this slide, like one is what is the business outcome? We'll get back to that in a sec. But what is in your release? Is your release good enough to go out the door? Do you have adequate testing? What did you learn from the previous releases? Like, are you improving? Do you have your feedback? Do you have enough testing? Not just fire and forget. Not just do I have a list of, I have 1,000 tests. I have 3,000 tests. Something's got to be tested in that 1,000 tests. Something has to happen. So it's all automated. So we're good. But what is the point? Well, we have a few points. One, we're trying to release with higher quality. We're not just trying to get something out the door. But two, we're trying to actually achieve a business outcome. And we forget all the time that we are trying to achieve a business outcome. And why is that? Because when people write requirements, and I'm one of those people that write requirements, we don't put down the business reason for those requirements. We put down functional requirements, our performance requirements, but we don't put down the goal we're trying to achieve. And so the development community doesn't necessarily fully understand. They might have an idea, but they don't fully understand the goal we're trying to achieve with this particular release or this particular set of releases. And the problem is that's one. And two, we lack the visibility to even get the right data to even help us with that. Sorry, Alex, go on.
No, so we've just established why requirements always suck, because Steve never writes it down correctly.
Whoa, now you're just going back at me. Just because you gave your KPIs, don't come back on me.
I'm going to start handing out points here for best diss.
Wow.
10 points to you, Alex. It's your ball, Steven.
Thanks. Wow, I thought you were going to add something to the presentation there. And so, and this is the problem. This is one of the problems, is that when we don't have the metrics and we don't have the visibility into the metrics, what are you going to fall back on? You're going to fall back on what you already know. okay, I tested 1,000 tests. They seem to pass. Did they test the right things? I have no idea. Okay, and so we got to get this thing out the door faster. We've released faster. So that's a metric I can track. But I don't have all the other ones. I don't know how I heard anecdotally that what was in production seemed to be okay. So I don't know. So I don't have the feedback loops. I actually don't even know all the features that were supposed to happen. When you're doing, say, a 6-month release, you have no idea how many features were supposed to be in that. And when you're doing a 2-week release, you have no idea. It's so quick, you have no idea what features. So having that visibility is it would definitely help, but not have that visibility is problematic. Alex, anything of value that you want to add to this?
No, not at this time. I've made my contribution already.
Thank you. All right. So now, actually, before the poll question, Alex, we're talking about this business value, and we're talking about what did we learn. Oh, what? Yeah, look at that, huh? Isn't that cool? What did we learn from the previous release? So, Alex, I know you have something to say about this when it comes to how do you track the business value?
Yeah, so it's very it depends on each organization, but in general, the way you have to approach this is really trying to understand from the business, what are they trying to do, or what are they trying to get or improve, right? What's the hypothesis that they have that they're translating that into a functionality, into a feature, into something else to be enabled to their user, and that very explanation that has to be turned into some sort of KPI that has to be always kept in mind for the team that's actually delivering it. So if you are transforming, the way you develop, test, and release software, plan, develop, test, release software, you really have to keep that business goal in mind throughout your value chain. And then if you do that, once you get to that very last mile of releasing the application to the hands of the user, you have to continuously measure that not only in pre-production environments, but in production environments, measure if your users are actually being able to realize the original value that the business had theorized, right? So let's say, practical example, with this new feature, we're going to increase the number of student accounts opened for our bank, right? Just as an example, because now we are maybe removing a step out of 7 steps to open a student bank account. Now it's just 5 or 4, whatever. And we believe that by doing so, we're going to have a 15% increase in the number of student accounts that are opened, just as an example. So then, the developers, testers, support, operations engineers, and everybody will have to keep that in mind throughout the life cycle. And then in production, you have to actually measure if over a certain period of time, you are achieving that 15% increase in number of student accounts open. And if yes, then great, right? What have you learned from that throughout the life cycle of that release, the past release that just dropped that piece of code? And if not, then what have you learned that can be and should be improved for the next time? Well, maybe we realize that, by reducing from 7 screens to 4 screens, now we're making it more complex because the user, is missing some type of, information that are making them sure and confident that they can open their account in a secure way, for example, right? So the change actually was kind of backfired. It was not they did not see an increase. They saw a decrease or just a stable number of account openings. But what have you learned? You have to be able to see that in production, measure that in production, so that you can, from a business perspective, you can implement in the next go round of your life cycle, implement the additional tweaks that need to be made in the application And if it's something that's very damaging, for example, now you don't see an increase, you see a reduction in number of accounts, you need to react really fast. You have to go through that life cycle again extremely fast. And if you still have manual touch points in that life cycle, then obviously you will still, like you as a business, will continue losing account openings, right, from a business standpoint. So that's why Agile and DevOps are somewhat of a symbiotic relationship, because if you get it right, if you get the right balance, then you're able to react very quickly. And that's what research shows. Again, for the past 3 years, very clearly it shows that those teams that have successfully gone through that transformation, both Agile and DevOps, they are able to not just put out features with quality and faster and realize business value, but when they get it wrong, because they do get it wrong, they can react to that in a matter of hours, not in a matter of weeks or months.
So what I've heard from this was a few things. One is, not only do you want to have metrics of your uptime and your performance and those things inside of production, but you also have to be able to track your business goals. If there are business goals that are trackable this way, which would be maybe revenue, maybe the number of users on a particular site, maybe the amount of time users are staying on your site, those types of things. But you also need to be able to track where users are actually falling off your site. If they're not completing the tasks, figuring out where and why, and trying to correlate, is it a performance issue? Is it too many buttons? Is it whatever it is? So those are things that you have to track as well, not just the operations of it's up, I don't know what you're talking about. You actually have to get down into business goals and usability metrics in order to track. The other thing I learned is that since Alex does game things, we don't want Alex to be part of the banking industry where he's going to game it, so all these students are going to get loans that they can't pay back. So this is another thing that we're really concerned about.
Boom.
But let's go on. So back to you, Alex. So before we move on, we do have 2 poll questions that we would like to see where you guys are at. The first one is going to be about tracking that business value.
Great. Our poll is up and active. So everyone jump in and please respond.
Yeah, Alex, the whole time I was really trying to hold back when she said student loans. I'm like, oh, Alex wants to game it with student loans.
I was going to suggest even that there are approaches to doing counterbalancing of metrics so you can catch Alex when he's gaming things.
There's always a way, Mitch.
There's always a way. Okay, we got about half of our participants' audience is voted, so they're still coming in. Let's see, we'll give it do the countdown clock, maybe about 5 more seconds. Starting to trail off. Oh, good. Well, we've hit 60%. I'm going to close the poll there so we can get some ideas. And here you go. Oh, what does that tell us, guys?
I'm not seeing the poll results.
Oh, they are showing. Alex, can you see the poll results?
Yeah, it should be in the middle of the screen.
If you're
maybe because I'm sharing. Maybe because I'm sharing. Yeah, so you talk, Alex.
So NPS scores and customer reviews is the one that was most voted, 34%, which is interesting because that's a very common type of way of measuring, but however, it's very subjective too, right? So it's
and it's not really business value. It shows if they're happy. It shows if the customers are happy, but it doesn't show if you're really achieving your business goals.
Exactly.
What about? So, I know the last one was I have no idea. How many people answered that one?
16%. Yeah. So I have no idea. Feedback in my yearly review and number of support tickets were all around 15%, give or take. And then the second one after NPS scores was we track ROI from ideation or investments to production by monitoring. So 22%.
22%, I would love to have a conversation with that 22% to understand exactly how they're tracking that and how they get that into production, because that is awesome. That 22%. I mean, it's less than a quarter, but still not bad. At least 22% is doing that. Now, one of the things that we've seen is, yeah, business value is not necessarily the easiest thing to track. It needs to be tracked, but it's not the easiest thing to do. So what about, how do we let's just talk about a release. Let's take away the business value for right now. From a release, how do we know when a release is ready to go into production? How do we know it's good to actually release? And that's the next poll question.
All right, we're putting up our next poll. Here we go. And launching now. Okay. How do you know your release is ready to deploy? And it's open for voting.
This one should be interesting too.
Yeah, I'm interested. I thought it was a really good observation about the tracking the value from ideation. That was interesting, 22%.
Yeah.
It's like about half of our audience here.
Good.
Yeah. We'll let it tick up to get up about 60%. We're pretty close here. Counting down. Going once, going twice, sold. All right, here's our results are up. Alex, I'll let you read those. Let's see.
Yeah, all right. So the highest one with 67% was they look at completed work items, and then followed by 18% saying that they look at burn down charts, and then they 10% ask development, R&D lead, and I have no idea with 5%. Yeah, so look at completed work items seems to be the vast majority here as to how people determine that the release is ready to deploy.
Okay, so let's move on from that. And the reason why I'm moving on is because we're going to have a little chat about that poll question here. Oh, I forgot, I added this slide. I just added this slide for humor's sake, because I love the animation. The wall falls and cracks the floor. Someone spent a lot of time on that animation. I just think fantastic. But we'll move on. So again, how do we know about the quality? We look at the burn down charts. We look at code coverage. We look at requirements coverage. Right? We do that. But here's the problem. When we look at code coverage, we're saying, oh, on average, we want 80% code coverage. 80% code coverage across an application, it's not meaningful when you're doing Agile releases. When you're doing Agile, you're doing very small changes or smallish changes because you're trying to do it every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, right? So therefore, the normal code coverage doesn't work. What you really want to look at is current changed code coverage, and you want that to be 100%. You don't want your overall code coverage because you can have a few releases that you still get are within the 80% ballpark and you never tested a thing. So using that 80% doesn't work. When you're doing massive releases, yes, that might work. But when you're doing Agile releases, doesn't work. Burn down charts. Burn down charts only work if you're testing well. If you're actually finding all the bugs. If you're not testing properly, if you don't know exactly what you're testing, you don't have positive and negative and edge case tests, your burn down charts aren't really showing you that you're ready. It's just showing you what you tested. And we think we're ready based on that. So you can't just look at that in isolation. You have to have other metrics around the burn down charts. Burn down charts are good, but you have to know all the other things are working properly. And then we look at requirements coverage. How much of our requirements are actually covered? But the problem there is that you add one test to a requirement and it's covered. What does that mean? Did you really cover that requirement? You've added one test to it. How is that really covered? What I have found in most places is what they do is they ask the dev and QA leads, what does your gut say? Are you ready to release? What does your gut say? And again, when you're doing longer releases, the gut may be good. It may be good enough. But when you're doing rapid releases, you don't have a good gut feeling anymore because you don't know, because you're going so fast. I don't know where the testing is. I don't know how much testing. I'm just trying to get this thing to be really fast. Where this is the normal way that I can find that people do releases, is what does your gut say? Now, there's the other extreme where it's just blind, where we just have the automation scripts going and we just push it out to production. I don't think the majority of enterprises do that, or at least maybe one group in enterprise does that, but the majority does not do that. But that's another way of doing it. Well, we don't even look. We just push it out if the test passed. Whether they're the right test or the wrong test, who cares? So,
yeah.
Moving on.
And Steve,
oh, sorry, go on.
Just to add to that, because you touched on something I was going to elaborate also. Because all the Fortune 500 companies that we work with, right? They are at that very stage. Nobody really has everything figured out. So the gut feel approach is still predominant in the large enterprises. And yes, you have those cloud native applications, or those more those specific pockets of innovations across the organization. They may not rely on gut feel, but in many parts of the organization, especially in the more traditional, more legacy technology stacks, which, by the way, usually means that they're mission critical. That's why they're slower to be moved to more modern technology. Usually in those mission critical applications, they still rely a lot on SME knowledge, on gut feel, and so on. So it is possible to transform those as well, and we are seeing that happen, but at a much slower pace because of the risk involved. So I think if you are listening to us and you are thinking, well, nobody really releases based on gut feel anymore, I mean, you'd be surprised. It's definitely predominant out there in large organizations, and understandably so. But it is changing. That's the good news. It is changing. It's trending in the right direction.
So when we look at all the things that we've talked about, we can look at this as the 7 sins, or the 4 sins, or the 4 goals that you should achieve in order to adopt DevOps. But really, we do have to shift right. We can't leave everything to centers of excellence in these different islands. We do have to shift left. So we have to shift left. We have to get more stuff done in these Agile teams and squads. That is for sure. If we don't do that, we cannot increase the speed. But we also have to do the shift right. We have to do testing in production as well. We cannot just leave all the testing to pre-production. But what we also need is, we need automation. There's no question. But I guess even on the chat, you can't have blind automation. You have to have intelligent automation. I can automate 3,000 scripts, but maybe I only need to run 10. Maybe I only need to run 50 scripts. So why not have some intelligent automation to pick and choose what I really need to run in order to achieve my goals? I need to have the visibility into what is really being released, and are we actually ready to be released? And that also has to do with feedback. I need the feedback from what happened in production. I need to learn from production so I can learn better on how to do my releases. I don't just want, okay, I know my burn down chart is 0, so I'm good. I need to know how much of my feature set is being completed, how much of my tests are passed or failing, how much of what I have open as part of defects. I need to understand a lot of different aspects of what the release is before I can say something is good or not. So I need that visibility, and that goes across what's in my requirements tool, my defects tool, my pipeline tool, my testing tool, my production monitoring tool. There's a lot of information that I got to grab from a lot of different tools in order to have that. But this is what is needed if you're trying to really achieve DevOps. And again, when we talk about DevOps, we're talking about achieving, releasing at the speed that you need to release at, with the high quality that you need to release at. Alex, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I saw it. I was looking through the questions. There was one interesting one that was very makes a lot of sense to talk
Only
about
one
on this
interesting
slide.
question, people. There was only one interesting question. All the rest, not interesting at all. There was just one. Good for you.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
really, really good question. I love this one. No, it was more around, what about adding acceptance criteria or quality gates? Some people refer to that, and it ties nicely to these sins here, as you were talking about. As a team that's working on a release or that's working as part of a release, you really need to decide together what's the criteria based on those KPIs. Always keeping those business KPIs in mind. What's the criteria that will enable your code to flow from one environment to the next and to the next, all the way to the end of the users? And all of that can and should be automated in an intelligent way, like Steve was saying. And for you to understand where to start, again, it's a team exercise. It's not one particular role on the team that is responsible for that. As a team, everybody needs to decide what makes sense for the automation in the pipeline to allow something to go from the dev environment to the next, whatever the next environment is in your workflow. And as you implement those automated gates across environments, and you can be a lot more granular, and you should actually, as you get more mature, at the individual developer level, and then at the environment level, and then eventually at the release level. But you should implement those automated quality gates in order to for that determination, if this is good enough to move forward or not, for that determination to be done in an automated way. And as Steve was saying, also, over time you will be gathering a lot of data, based on rejection, right? So this code is not good enough to move on to the next stage, and this code is good, and so on. Over time, you accumulate a lot of data. You should be accumulating a lot of data, and that's when it starts making sense to apply AI, machine learning, to start proactively understanding what's the current state of your release, whether it's going to be successful or not successful, so you can take action much earlier in the life cycle, as opposed to being reactive as it is most cases today.
Yeah, if I could jump in,
that's a valid. Yeah,
Stephen,
sure.
I think if you would kind of roll this into your answer also. One of our participants, Pradeep, was asking about the importance of testing in different environments, like if you're doing in DevOps or if you're working in cloud, because you had mentioned legacy environments. Do any of those factors change, testing and the importance of it, or the strategy that you use?
Well, I mean, there's strategies that you would change, but you clearly have to get your testing done. Now, some people would say, well, I'm in cloud, so it'll auto expand and I'll grab the machines that I need, so I don't need to test performance. That's not true. You still need the performance testing. You'll still have bottlenecks, whether it's your database or whether it's just the response time coming back, no matter how many machines you allocate for it. So you still have to do your performance testing. You still have to do your functional testing. So whether it's in the cloud or not, you might have different tool sets that you need to use in order to do that testing. You may have to work with your security teams on how to get access to certain areas, depending upon how you're doing it. But I don't necessarily think it fundamentally changes what you have to test. You can use virtual services to block out things that aren't available. You can have other methods of doing your performance and your UI and your API testing. But fundamentally, it's not like you can drop some testing just because it's a cloud versus a legacy. Alex, any points on that?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question there, because we see that common, opinion, I think, or expectation that, now we move to the cloud, we don't need to worry about performance, right? Or even functionality, if it's working or not. But in reality, it's the exact opposite. If anything, you need to double down, triple down on testing, because what you need to change is the focus, right? Or the goal of let's say the performance test, if that's what you're focusing on. But you need to change the goal of that performance test. It's no longer about evaluating infrastructure, if whether the infrastructure can handle different workload profiles. It's more about evaluating and assessing the user experience given the new infrastructure that's being used and the application is being deployed on. So if you do that, and if you just apply your traditional performance testing methodologies, thought process, and techniques and tools, and at the end of the test, you provide a report that says, these 7 servers here, they were fine. These 2 app servers were, overloaded. There was, memory leaks here. If you approach the performance test from that angle, you're not going to be successful, because you can show all metrics you want, but at the end of the day, it's not as meaningful as if showing from a performance testing perspective that, yeah, from a user experience point of view, I don't care about the infrastructure, but from a user experience, I know it was perfect. It was seamless. It was as designed. And then in the back end, obviously you have to monitor that, but you can't be hung up on the whether the back end infrastructure was overloaded or not, because you have things like auto scaling and things like that, as Steve was saying. And if that handled the additional workload well to the point where the user experience was fine, great. But if you're measuring, and this is something we find a lot, you're measuring the backend infrastructure and you say, oh, it's all good. Everything was perfect. Everything was within the normal thresholds that we expected. But then you go check the user experience. It's terrible. Users are waiting and so on. And then you may think, well, but I'm not responsible for this other segment on the network. I'm not responsible for this other service. But at the end of the day, as you're going through this transformation, you have to change the focus. It's really about starting your activities, development, testing, everything from a user point of view.
All right, we have 8 minutes, so we're going to go really fast through this. And this is the whole point of our entire presentation. Everything we talked about, Broadcom, surprisingly, has the ability to help you out. We have tools to help you across the entire value stream, the entire line. What we call BlazeMeter continuous testing platform. It is a platform. And with this platform, we give you the ability at the time of requirements to auto-generate tests for you. So now the developers can actually develop to those tests. So that speeds up the testing. The automated tests are automatically created for you. So now you can get that testing done in sprint while you're doing the development. And
yeah, there were a lot of questions about test-driven development, behavior-driven development. So that's exactly lined up with that.
Yes, because we completely agree with the behavior-driven development. Now, some people are using Gherkin with Cucumber. We can handle that as well, but we have a visual way of putting that together, so it's not just a text way, but a visual way of doing that. And so you can build out your test cases as well as your automated scripts. Then we have a way of running and managing all different types of tests, whether it's your API test, your UI functional tests, your performance test, all cloud native. We can handle running it on-prem and in the cloud. So we have those solutions as well. And we go all the way into production because testing doesn't stop. You're trying to do, it's a continuum. So into production, we do API monitoring all through the same tool. So now the developers, your Agile teams, now can do their own monitoring in production. So when there's a problem, they get alerted immediately, not just the ops guys get alerted. And then they have to figure out who they need to talk to, which development team and all that. The development team can get alerted directly so we can reduce that mean time to resolution. Now, when we talk about all these automated tests, you have all these automated tests that you want to run. Well, what if there's a way to do intelligent automation where you choose the test that you need to run based on the requirement and based on the code that was changing? So we can pick and choose the right test, minimize your risk, and decrease your time in order to get something out the door. So that's that. I'll get into that a little bit more in a sec. And then finally, how do I know when I'm ready to release? I need to be able to pull all this data across all these different types of tools. And that's where the release status comes from. This is release with confidence. So we give you the ability to help you not only create the tests, manage the tests, but the deploy. We have the pipeline, the release pipeline, not just a build pipeline. You have a build pipeline, great, but we manage the release pipeline for you. And then into operations, we manage the monitoring and the testing inside of production as well. So if we break this down inside of the platform, well, we've already talked about, I can auto-generate the tests. I have the UI functional API performance testing, and not just functional UI, but we also provide scriptless UI testing. So you have your objects, and you can create scripts that way as well. So we provide scriptless. We also provide the ability inside the tool itself to create your own virtual services. So you were talking about, someone had the question, I think it was the only good question apparently from Alex, was how do you handle the different environments? Maybe it was someone else, sorry. But you can create your own virtual services. The developers can create the virtual services. They can create the virtual services through HAR files, through using WireMock as an open source, through our own code SV. We have a code SV, which is an open source to create virtual services as well. You can create it through Swagger documents. You can create it through different types of recording mechanisms, many different ways of creating these virtual services. So you don't have to go to a different tool. It's all through the same tool, and you can link those virtual services up to the tests themselves. So that way, every time that test runs, the virtual services will be configured and launched for you automatically. You don't have to worry about, was it up, was it running? I can link them, because you don't always have your environments available for you. Whether it's cloud, whether it's on-prem, you don't have the environments. Virtual services are a must. The faster you're trying to get something out the door, the more needed virtual services are. And the virtual services help you do negative testing, things you can't always do with your production environments or other environments. It's just hard to force negative, where virtual services gives you the ability to do negative. And then we also have our API testing and monitoring in production as well. Again, it's that continuum. AI-driven, this is where we can pick and choose the tests. We can prioritize the tests. We pick and choose based on the code that was changed, based on the failures. We will remove. If a test is always failing, we'll remove it because you don't need it. You're not fixing it. You're not changing it. Why have a failed test? If tests are always passing and you're not changing the code that's associated with it, we'll remove those. We will shrink down the test set that you need to run based on the code that was changed, based on the requirements that are being updated. And we'll prioritize it. Failures will go first, so you don't have to wait the entire time to figure out if you fix things. So it automatically prioritizes and automatically chooses the test for you. And then finally, we give an AI-based way of deciding if you are ready to release or not. We have a score. We use a lot of different metrics. We use production. We use test coverage. We use whether your features are complete. We use the number of tests and the types of tests that are running, all these different metrics to come up with a score to let you know if you're ready to release or not. And I have 1 minute, so I will also say, one of the things that this will also be able to do is once you have the score, we can adjust your canary deployments based on the score. So you want to do automatic, you want to have gates, but you want it automatic. So one of the things that you can do is based on the score, if it's a low score, we can still push it out to production, but we'll do a canary deployment for you. But not just any canary deployment, we will adjust the canary deployment based on the release score. So we will do a smaller canary deployment to minimize your risk. We can always block it, so you do a manual deploy, but we can also do an automated way of adjusting risk based on scores. And we have 1 more minute for questions. That was fast. That was
really good.
Sorry, go on.
Since we're right up against our time here, I'm going to put the winners of the gift card into the chat to everyone. Let's wrap up with this question. What would you recommend as a starting point for metrics? This is someone kind of just getting out the door with how to get started.
Well, starting point, Alex, do you want to take that?
Sure. So really, as you are, if you are Agile and you're doing your, Agile planning or sprint planning, and you're getting to backlog grooming, it's very critical that you understand and ask the product owner, what is it that, from a business standpoint, what is this new feature or this new story going to deliver, or what do they expect it to deliver to the business? Not just think about, oh, we need to create this functionality for the sake of creating it because it's cool or whatever, but always try to understand what is the business idea behind that feature that the business believes will improve for the business or for the user experience, depending on your company. Always try to understand that, and then once you do, keep that in mind for your team. Put in a board, in a very visible area for your team, so that everything you do as you're automating the pipeline, as you are moving code forward, you understand what you are up against, and always relate back to to that business KPI and codify, automate that business KPI into your pipeline.
Before we drop, I want to say congratulations to Eddie and Lisa. You won the gift cards. Thank you all very much for attending the webinar. This thing's going to cut out in about 10 seconds. So great. Thank you all very much for your time.
You bet. Alex, Stephen, thank you very much. And thank you to our audience. Appreciate your time. Everybody have a great day and be careful out there.